Welcome to the Executive Pill, where we explore the critical skills every leader needs. And today we're talking about political savvy, an essential skill for every single executive and every individual hoping to become an executive one day. So the reality is missteps in this area can be costly. I'll share three big mistakes that I've made and an example of an executive who lost his job twice for doing the same exact thing. Um, it's hard. The reality, this is hard, but we got to learn these skills. Otherwise, we will end up with our head on the chopping block. Is the reality. So we're going to uncover how to navigate office politics officially and effectively. I'm your host, Alex Tremble, CEO of GPS Leadership Solutions, with over a decade of experience coaching top executives in both the public and private sector. I've seen how political savvy can make or break careers. And look, learning from mistakes is the key to getting ahead. And the reality is you don't always got to learn from your mistakes if you listen to others. So again, I'm going to share some of my big ones today, three big ones today, and then hopefully you'll learn from those and implement the strategies, the ideas, so you don't have to feel those knock your head against the wall that often, as much. So let's talk about this. Navigating office politics requires self-awareness and strategic thinking. And here are three lessons from my journey. The first is you have to understand your influence. And by underestimating your influence, you kind of set yourself up for failure. See, early in my career, as many of you know, I was blessed. My job was to create and manage the executive leadership development program for a cabinet level federal agency, as well as managing three government-wide senior leader and executive leadership development programs. And because I did this when I was 23 years old, it made absolutely no sense, but they did. My career took off. That is because I was around the most influential leaders within the federal government as well as the private sector. I would meet with Fortune 500 companies. I would meet with assistant secretaries, deputy assistant secretaries, and so on and so forth. And those individuals began to like me. They began to open their doors. They began to invite me to meetings. They began to allow me to have more influence on the work they did and why what they're able to do. And it was amazing, right? I thought like this was the smartest thing for me to gain as much influence and power as possible so that I can help my supervisor implement her goals, her ideas, her strategies. The thought was that we'd be in tandem together, right? But what you learn is that people want you to do well, but they don't want you to do better than them. And so there became a point in my career where I wasn't being invited to meetings that she wasn't invited to. There became a point in my career where I had meetings with individuals and connections with individuals and lunches with individuals that she wishes she could have had access to, but those people just didn't care for her as much. And again, me, from a very naive perspective, I thought, well, if they don't care for her, this is great because now I can be the extension of her. But that's not how she saw it. There was one incident in particular where I was getting ready to host an event, and I asked a colleague of mine who at that point was the director of intergovernmental affairs for an agency. I said, "Hey, would you mind getting the governor of a particular state?" It was actually Cory Booker at the time, I believe. Would you mind inviting him to my event so that I can get more people in the room? It'd be great. She said, "Absolutely wonderful." I said, "Cool. Let me go just confirm this with my supervisor." I brought the idea. She said, "How do you get access to that person?" I said, "Oh, well, it's easy. I know this person over here, and they going to do a favor for me." And she said, "No, you are not moving forward with this. This is done. You're done. Don't reach out to anyone else." I said, "Well, I haven't moved forward with anything. This is an option. Ultimately, it's going to make you look good." No, it didn't. It didn't align with where she saw me as an individual. She saw me as subordinate. The fact that I had access to people and influence that she didn't have access to made me her competitor. Again, this is very, very hard for me to understand because this was someone who had groomed me, who had hired me, who had mentored me, who had introduced me to so many people. But again, people want you to do well, just not better than them. And so the actionable tip from this section is you have to be aware of how your actions and influence are perceived by others. especially your superiors. If you're in a situation where your superiors on board and they're on your team, then great. Then they're going to watch you fly and they're going to freaking love it, right? But if you have even an inkling that your supervisor or those around you could become jealous, then from a political savvy standpoint, you want to be much more intentional. Well, maybe downplaying some of the connections you have, or again, always giving them props. Hey, thank you so much for putting me in this position because of you, I met this person and we're able to do the work that you said was so important. And always make it about serving them, right? I always tell people, if you can identify someone's PPF, if you can identify any individual you want to have a relationship with or build influence with, their PPF, their personal goals, their professional goals, or their financial goals, if you can help them reach those, they will, generally speaking, love you. Okay, so make sure you don't underestimate your influence and understand how you're being perceived by those individuals around you. The second big mistake, and this is actually pretty funny, the second big mistake I made was actually being too nice. I was asked to oversee a regional group of leaders, about 7 people all across the country, and I was so excited. When I saw the work they were doing, I was like, this is so cool. This is awesome. We're going to be freaking successful together. Like, I jumped in with both feet, and every call, it was about understanding their goals, their priorities, how the person in my position in the past had not served them well, so I can do better. Like, it was always about serving them. And about 4 months into me working there, one of my employees came to me and said, "Hey, Alex, you know they don't trust you, right?" I was, what do you mean they don't trust me? What do you mean? They don't trust you, Alex. I said, why? He says, honestly, they say you're too nice. They say there's no way that you truly care about them that much. And this was very, very interesting to me. And this is the case for many people, right? If you are a leader who is truly coming into an organization, wanting to support your team and those individuals around you, but they have been through circumstances and worked with individuals who either were horrible individuals outright, or they acted as if they cared and they undermined them, right? The reality is that people are survivors. We learn how to survive and navigate the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And so if you're working with an individual and or a team that has gone through or had to live through some bad leadership, and you come in actually being a good person, they're going to distrust you. And that's normal, right? They're trying to keep themselves safe. And so what I encourage you to do is be watchful of your behaviors, right? Because in those circumstances, they're watching you even more closely. They're going to want to make sure that everything you say is in alignment with your behaviors. So the actionable tip from this side is balance your kindness with time and transparency in your actions to build genuine trust. I love this example. If you brush your teeth for 2 minutes one day, what does that do? Nothing. If you brush your teeth for 2 minutes for a week, what does it do? Really nothing. But if you brush your teeth for 2 minutes for a year, there's a significant change, right? But it only happens, it's the same exact small behavior, but it only makes a change over time, consistency. So you have to be willing to overcome those questions they're having against you. And the only way you do that, and honestly, there's 2 ways you can do this, really. One, you can be a good person. You can be a trustworthy person. You can be someone that you know that you would want to trust. That is one option. Absolutely. And a lot of people do that. Or the second option, which I think is actually much more effective, ask people who they want. If you have a conversation with someone, say, hey, look, you give them a reason first. Hey, I just listened to this podcast, The Executive Appeal with Alex Tremble, and they shared how important building trust is within a team and how we should just be overt about asking. So I'd love to ask you, what are 2 or 3 things that someone could do to establish trust? If they did it, you would say, wow, that is someone I trust, right? And they list those two things. Great. Now, of those three things, two, three things, what is the most important one? Wow. Great. Thank you. Okay. Okay. What I want to do is I want to ask you for your help. I would like to focus for the next 3 months. The next 3 months, I want to focus on demonstrating this behavior to you because you and our ability to build trust and have trust in relationship is critical for our success, and it means a lot to me. So I'm going to ask you for a favor. Would you please hold me accountable for doing this thing that you said is so important to you? Obviously, it's got to be reasonable, it's got to be ethical, it's got to be legal, obviously. But can you please hold me accountable? If you ever see me not doing that, just pull me to the side. Hey, Alex, remember you said you want to do this. Would you mind helping with that? I promise you 9 times out of 10, people will be happy to. Now it's funny because I actually I run these executive retreats and team building workshops, and I did this example, and someone said, "Well, isn't that setting yourself up for failure?" I'm like, "How so?" Like, well, if you ask them what they want you to do, then they're going to be looking at you to do it. Yes, absolutely. If you ask someone what behaviors could be helping, again, and it's reasonable, they're going to be watching you. And if you do not follow through those behaviors, if they're going to, it's actually going to diminish the trust you have with them. Absolutely. Just don't do that. Do what you're supposed to do. Again, it shouldn't be that hard to demonstrate that behavior. Again, as long as it's legal, ethical, moral, demonstrate that behavior. If it's talking straight, if it's, bringing people off to the side versus having conversations in front of people, whatever it may be, just commit yourself to doing it. And I promise you, yes, it is there. There's big risk, but there's also big reward. Okay. So again, actionable. Balance your kindness with time and transparency in your actions to build genuine trust. The third one is honestly was my lack of intentional relationships. So I worked in the National Park Service for a while, and what made me successful in that role was my access and influence. I had connections to the White House. I had connections to the House and Senate. I had leaders all across the government that I could pull on to help me reach me and my team and our organization reach its mission. That's what made me so valuable of a player in that role. And that was during the Obama administration. What I learned really quickly once President Trump had taken over was I didn't have no relationships on the other side. I had gotten too comfortable with having connections in that particular administration, that particular space. And what you learn from a political savvy standpoint is that you need to be very intentional with having connections everywhere. Because the reality is that your team, whoever your team is not always going to be empowered. They're not always going to have the resources, the information, the tools, whatever it may be, the access that you need. And so who could possibly have that access? It took me years to develop the same level of relationships I had in administration, the Obama administration with the Trump administration, the past one. It took me years, right? Because I wasn't intentional. So again, I encourage you, your actionable takeaway is always be intentional about creating relationships across different sides. You never know who you might need and what support you might need for your initiatives. So just be intentional with that. Just because you don't like someone or you don't agree with them does not mean that you shouldn't spend the time, energy, and effort to build connections where you may be able to help one another. Now, I said I was going to tell you about a real life story, and I want to just tell you one last thing. And I promise I'm going to keep it moving. People don't like this. This is a very uncomfortable thing I'm about to say. But I do believe in speaking softly, but carrying a big stick. What does that mean? I do believe from a political savvy standpoint, it is very, very important to always lead from a place of respect, of mutual respect, right, of one another, a place where you're building trust, a place where you are compassionate, a place from an integrity, ethical, moral standpoint. I think we should be the kind, compassionate leaders. And by doing that, you encourage people to want to follow you, right? And that is where we should always start. And I believe you should always have a stick. I believe that you should always be focused on gaining power and influence so that it can be the deterrent. The reality is I'll be honest with this. There were so many people who I worked with over the years, um, worked with me because they wanted to. They had fun. They knew I was looking out for their best interests. They enjoyed working with me, and they knew I was doing good, right? And there were those individuals who did not care for me, but they never took a shot at me because they knew who I knew. They knew the power, they knew the access I had, and that if they did come for me, it would not end well for them, right? And this actually then takes us to that story. So there is an executive who I didn't necessarily coach, I was more so mentoring him. Really, really wonderful guy, nice guy, kind guy, loved the guy. Um, but he was blind. See, he ignored the signs that someone was out to undermine him. This particular individual had a subordinate. He was an executive. He had a subordinate who wanted his job. And his subordinate engaged in a number of activities to make him look bad, make his boss look bad. His subordinate found ways to intentionally meet with his boss's boss and start garnering that relationship. His subordinate did a very good job of finding ways to publicly make himself look good while also diminishing his supervisor. But unfortunately, the supervisor didn't want to see it. The supervisor at every step found a way to rationalize what the person had did. Oh, he didn't mean to do that. What he meant to do was X, Y, and Z. Oh, he would never do that until he found himself out of a job. The person had navigated in such a way that the boss, his supervisor's boss, no longer felt confident in his ability to lead the organization. And so they moved him out and moved his subordinate up. Now, the unfortunate part is that, again, nice guy, kind guy, I ran into a colleague of mine who ended up working in his directorate at another organization. And they said the same thing happened. They said, oh my God, he's so nice. He's so kind. Love working with him. He's being pushed out by his subordinate. Unfortunately, he was unwilling to look at reality. And so that is the last piece that I want to share with you today is about, if you're talking about political savvy, you cannot allow yourself to live in a world of rainbows, jelly beans, and gumdrops. There's no unicorns jumping around in the background. It doesn't happen. It doesn't work. That's not real. If you want to be effective at navigating organizational politics, you must first make sure that you are living in the real world. You have to understand what is happening around you. Why is it happening? Why could this person be moving? And even if that person is unintentionally moving against you, then how do you now protect yourself? Again, it doesn't mean you need to be mean, aggressive, nasty, disrespectful, all those things. You can do those things while protecting yourself. And again, I think that's one of the biggest issues that most people have is they believe that understanding how to navigate organizational politics is in itself evil, mad, whatever it may be. And I'll tell you, this is a stupid thought, and I apologize, but it's real. This is stupid because any individual who has accomplished anything of significance in the past has always had a combination of compassion. Yes, they cared, they loved, they wanted the best, and power, the ability to influence, the ability to push people away who were not in alignment with what their goals are. Look at Martin Luther King. Compassion, absolutely, and stood his ground and had hordes of people around him who were doing their best to protect them. Unfortunately, he was murdered, but did their best to support them, but push the agenda forward. Any leader, any effective leader who's accomplished anything of significance has always had compassion and caring while at the same time having the power, the influence to get things done. and to make sure people knew if they were moving against them, it was not going to be easy. John Maxwell actually says leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. Knowing how to manage that influence within your organization is essential. So look, here's your stop, start, and continue. Let's reflect. Start. What is one thing? What's one step that you'll take to become more political savvy? What is one step you can take? I mean, honestly, probably the most important step you can take is reading the books Relationships That Work by myself, and Unlocking the Executive Advantage. Why? Because Relationships That Work teaches you at every level. Again, I've had executives at top Fortune 50 companies read the book, as well as people who are on their way to becoming executive read the book and say, wow, this helped me be much more intentional and strategic about who I build relationships and connections with. Absolutely. So that's the first one, Relationships That Work. The second one is my most recent book, which is Unlocking the Executive Advantage. That book focuses on, now that you have relationships, who do you spend your time and energy with, and who do you now need to remove from the relationship docket you have? Because not everyone is the same level of importance. You only have so much time, so much energy. Again, I'll tell you, my wife and I have been together now for 17 years. We would not have been together for 17 years if I prioritized spending time with her at the same level I prioritize spending time with the barista at Starbucks, right? There's levels to this. There's priorities. And the book, Unlocking the Executive Advantage is expensive, right? $65. You can get on Amazon. Or if you're one of the first 100 people to download it, you can go to gpsleadership.org/workshop or workbook, and you'll get it. You can download the digital copy at no cost for the first 100 people. So I encourage you. So start. What's one step you'll take to become more political savvy? Second is stop. What behavior might be undermining your influence? And finally, continue. What positive leadership trait will you keep emphasizing? Look, if you haven't done so already, please do click that like. Just click a like. It may be something small for you, but it means a lot for us. Allows this message to get out. Again, thank you for listening to The Executive Pill. Connect with me on LinkedIn and visit gpsleadershipsolutions.org or gpsleadership.org for more insight. As always, I encourage you, stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving. See ya. Thanks for listening to The Executive Appeal with Alex Tremble. I invite you to follow The Executive Appeal wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow me, your host, Alex Tremble, across all socials or via email for exclusive webinars, courses, and speaking engagements on continued topics of executive leadership. So until next time, stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving.